What is up with the Supernote and what is going on with the new A5X2? And let's just talk a little bit about the platform in general. So let's go ahead and get into it. All right, everybody, welcome back to the channel. It's Ed, and I know I've been gone for a little while, but wanted to jump back in with what I think is really an important topic and something that we have talked about here and there, but it's really timely right now. There is a lot of movement in the e-ink space. A lot of things have changed. New players are entering. Some with devices that are fully functional and fully formed and totally hitting the market, some that are creating a lot of buzz but are still pre-production and have some units floating around out there. And we'll talk a little bit about that. But what I want to focus on in this video is around what I think Supernote or Ratta should be doing at this moment because it's so important. And all of you know I'm a fan. You know I'm a long-term Supernote user. I've used the A5X for the last almost 3.5 years now as my daily driver. It's what I use to do all of the things productivity and organization wise. The A6X2 is a wonderful device, and we're going to use it as kind of the walkthrough in this video because it's the most current version of the hardware. And I want to talk through what I think Ratta and Supernote need to focus on right now to be competitive with what may be the impending release of the A5X2. I just want them to be strategic. And again, I'm not being sponsored for this. I have no real insider information. I do have a contact with them and I reach out and I ask questions, but I get the same answers that are available in the Reddit community or anywhere else. But I do want to talk about the fact that I think there are 5 basic things they need to do to be able to really position themselves well with this changing landscape. So, with that said, I'm going to jump over and we will go ahead and take a look at what I think those top 5 things are. I will see you here in just a minute. All right, everybody. So, here we are with the device. And one thing I want to be really clear about is that these are suggestions. These are my feelings on what I think Rada could be doing better and where they should focus their time. Now, there was a time, and I can always admit a change in direction for me personally, where I thought Rada needed to throw out a new beta with the impending launch of the A5X2. I thought they needed to get something in the community. They needed to look at new features and functions that may come out with that piece of hardware, primarily because that's what they did with this device, with the A6X2. They changed the game with this dual slider concept, 300 DPI screen, but for that form factor. What I think they could really benefit from is taking a step back, maybe with the A5X2 coming out, focus in on the minor corrections or the things that aren't quite finished in this device. The software, the note-taking experience, it's so well done, but there are things that, quite frankly, we've been waiting on or we've been expecting to have happen, and they just haven't happened yet. And nobody really, I think, understands why. And I know there are a lot of things behind the scenes, and there may be some development issues that we're not aware of. But Rada has been so good in the past at being transparent that I'm hoping they do some more of that right now, especially with the competitiveness of the market. Before we dive into these 5 suggestions, and you can see here, I've got the calendar, gestures, desktop apps, the cloud interface, and UI consistency. But I think the elephant in the room, or the elephants in the room, are concerning all of the buzz and movement in the space. I think that books releasing the Go 10.3 into the marketplace, while not a direct competitor with the Supernote, more along the lines of targeting remarkable, is still sucking some of the oxygen out of the conversation. It's getting the buzz, it's getting the hype. And on top of that, you have this new, I don't even want to call it a competitor yet. I know Kit has reviewed it. I know Jeffrey Moss has reviewed a smaller version of it. And I know that Vladimir Kostek has one in hand, and that would be the V Woods AI paper. Quite frankly, from what I've seen, I'm not as bought into the hype, but that's primarily because this ecosystem works really well for me. And I think that it's really important that I acknowledge that. And quite frankly, I think most people know that about me already, that from a productivity and organization standpoint, this is my device. Obviously, it's the A5X, but I wanted, for the purposes of this demo, to talk about what we're more likely to see on an A5X2. And I think that'll be something similar to this design. So that's the market. That's what's happening. And Supernote has talked now for over a month about releasing teasers or more updates or plans or more images, and that hasn't happened. But they've also talked about early September rolling out mass production of the A5X2. So there's mixed messaging. And in my communications with them via email, they're still trying to hit that early September deadline. They're talking about trying to get review units out as soon as possible, but they're not sending out any of the pictures or images of these units in any meaningful way, causing a lot of speculation and, quite frankly, making people a little nervous. And I get that nervousness. So that made me reconsider my original suggestion was, get a beta out there, look at these new features, go ahead and fix the ones that I'm going to talk about here as well. But then I got to thinking about it and I thought, well, what might be a better strategy, might be a better way to approach this is to fix the things that we know people are struggling with right now. We know people want in this device right now. And I think there are some things that need to be addressed. So, for example, the calendar. The calendar in the Supernote, I think, is one of the hidden gems. I've done videos on it. I will link them in the description. I have really doubled down. I use it personally a lot because I sync it to my Google Calendar. It's one of my favorite things because of the fact that Supernote allows you to use it as much or as little as you want. You can go all in with Outlook or with Google and really integrate your calendar to be able to see things. And let's take a look at the calendar. Now on the A6X2, this is a little bit smaller, and if you go into the calendar here, you'll see I use this all the time. One criticism, and they did fix one bug, which was good, which was the idea the erase tool, didn't work in here with the gestures. And so this is kind of a twofer. I mentioned the gestures and I also mentioned this. And I did a dedicated show and tell on this piece. So what was happening in the A5X was if you do your scribble on the monthly view, and then you do your two finger gesture, this is what you got. And it happens here as well. No matter where you have your gesture set here, it will not erase that. You have to do the selector tool and you have to do that to erase. Now, if you go into the settings and you reverse and you make your two finger erase gesture on the screen and put your lasso on the sidebar, your lasso still won't work for selection, but now your two finger erase will work in the calendar. It's a small thing, but it's an important thing. So they fixed it, but they fixed it halfway. They fixed it as if you're only using the device like you would on the A5X. They didn't think through that it has to be able to toggle. It needs to recognize that if I have this set as my eraser, that it can then be used as a lasso erase. And that's what it's not doing. So that's a smaller thing and it goes into the gesture side a little bit, but it's one of the things that impacts the calendar directly. The other thing that we just showed is it's easy to write on here. So I can put in here meeting with Bill and I can write that on my monthly view. I can also go to my weekly view and I can put meeting with Bill. And there it is. It's very easy and seamless to use. Then we go to the daily view. And this is something that people have been asking for nonstop. And I think it's something that Supernote really needs to focus on. And that is that this needs to be writable. And it's not. It is not writable. it immediately kicks you out of or kicks you into another day. It sees it as a gesture. It's a small thing, but it's really important. Number one, if I'm using this as my planner without integrating it with Google, without integrating it with Microsoft, I want to be able to handwrite my meetings in here. So that kind of eliminates that user from being able to use this in an analog way. Now they can still press the button and create a meeting, the way you would in a more digital calendar, digital format such as Outlook or Gmail. So they can still engage that way. But if I really wanted this to just be an analog interface, something like My Daily Organizer from My Deep Guide, Voya has put together a beautiful PDF planner for the person who really wants that analog experience and wants to be able to see what they've written and what times they have things scheduled for. The beauty of Supernote is they're really good at balancing both of those use cases, but this is a big miss. It's something they need to get corrected, and they need to get it corrected right away. So to me, that's very important. Otherwise, the calendar feature is pretty awesome. My bucket list is to have both creation and last access dates available for notes. But again, I know it's creation date only. I've learned to work around that flow. It's not a deal breaker for me. I think down the line that's something they could address. But writing on the daily calendar and some of these small gesture fixes, I think they just need to release an update patch that just deals with features that are not working as expected. So we've talked about the calendar. You'll notice the to-do list is not on here because that's still a new functionality and I think it works as expected. I do think they will have improvements in the future. The other thing is gestures. And for me, this isn't as big of a deal as it has been for some others, but it is obviously something that is impacting a lot of people. The gestures are not consistent in some cases. And even for me, if I hold my palm right, on here, it sees it as me selecting the erase tool. And that's not a good place to be. So I'll be writing and then my stroke won't show up if I'm holding my pen the wrong way. So it's very important to have that functionality fixed. Sometimes the refresh doesn't work correctly. Sometimes the swipe down doesn't automatically pull up your menu. The undo and redo seems to have some issues for some people. And again, that may not work for or may not be a problem for everybody. You can see on my device it's working pretty well. But for some people, that's really been a problem, and even the selection tool sometimes is causing issues. It's just not a consistent experience. And I think they're trying to fix it, but they need to figure out why it's happening. Maybe it's about where you touch in a specific place. Maybe it's not sensitive enough to always pick up the undo redo, depending on how you do it. With the gestures, with the palm rejection, maybe it's reading it. I do the two finger swipe because I had so much trouble with the one finger swipe being a read that didn't work correctly. Consistency is the big issue here. And I think that's what I mean by gestures is they just need to double and triple check and make sure that the gestures they are having people use are consistent cross users. And again, throw that to the beta. Let us test it for you. Let users tell you what those instances are that are still happening. The next thing, and we're not going to, jump into the desktop apps. One thing is that they don't always sync correctly. They have some conflict files that come in. You have to be very careful if you have multiple devices to not have them syncing at the same time or have auto sync enabled. If you use the desktop app on multiple machines, it makes you sign out and back in each time you switch machines. There's just some friction there that quite frankly I don't think needs to be there around the desktop apps. And I've already submitted a ticket, but there's also an issue to where in the desktop app, the files have synced from the device to the cloud to the desktop app, and they're on your device. But when you open the desktop app interface, They don't show in the desktop app. But if you right click and take the file path to the machine, to your computer directory, you see those files. So they're hidden in some way. So again, it's about consistency of experience to make sure that when someone is using this, they can rely on it to be effective. That would be desktop apps. And I think they're working through that and they're really trying, and it's come a long way, but they've got to get that down. With this new device coming out, you want that device to hit the market with all of the basic software functions doing exactly what they should be doing. The same thing is on the cloud interface. I'm going to go ahead and check this off because I've done a dedicated video on the cloud interface. But the more I think about it, on the infrastructure side, they've done a lot of work in making the sync more consistent, but they still haven't quite got it there. They need to take the time, to make the desktop and the cloud app look the same as well as the device. You should see the same folders. One thing that is so interesting to me is when you go here, you see these folders. When you go to the desktop app, you see these folders, not the SD card. That they haven't done yet, but everything else, you have the same folder set up, and you have the to-do list on the desktop app and in the mobile app. You don't have that on the cloud. They've got to get that consistency down. You also can't access the calendar on the cloud, which you can't do that on the desktop app either. But I think that would be a nice added touch to be able to also access your calendar from there. Now that may be harder to do if you are using Google or Outlook, because then you're basically going to three different systems. And that I get. That may not be possible, but this basic piece should look the same, and it just doesn't yet. And I hope they get there on that really soon. We've talked about the calendar, which I really think there's small fixes that they can do right away to get that taken care of, and quite frankly, have the best calendar going if they get that taken care of. Personal opinion, absolutely, it's what I believe. Gestures, get those consistent. Roderick at Rants About Tech, 100% right. If he's having that much trouble with gestures that it is causing him so much friction that he just doesn't use them, how many other people are having those same experiences? Desktop apps, just talked about that, and the cloud app, those are kind of tied together because I think they're developing those in a way to try to get them consistent, but they just need to get there. And then I think it comes down to overall UI consistency. And I know a lot of these you're going to say, well, Ed, you just spent time talking about the user interface. You're right, I did. But I also talked about experience more than the interface itself. There needs to be some consistency in the UI. For example, how you highlight things in the PDFs and highlight versus marker. It's confusing. People see the marker and they think it's a highlighter, and it's not, it's a marker. It's meant to be used as a grayscale marker of different shades, whereas the highlight tool and the annotation tools are different, and they actually embed things, and they have to be typed within using either the virtual keyboard, using your handwriting recognition, or using the keyboard and typing it out. So to me, it's very important that they start to think about how the note interface, which is very similar to the PDF interface, but it's not the same. And they've got to get that under control so that when you're picking a tool, you kind of know what your tools are all the way around. But again, I am not knocking this device. I know it may sound that way, but it's really not. I would not be using the A5X every single day for everything I do, from teaching to administration to writing scripts for these YouTube videos, all of that. I would not be doing on a device that I didn't believe in, and that the workflow and the way it works makes me more productive. That's why it's so important to me that Ratta enter this conversation and get it right when they roll out the A5X2. And I really hope it rolls out for mass production and they start doing pre-orders within the next week to 10 days. I think that's so important. That's all for like kind of looking at the device. Let's hop back over, have some concluding thoughts, and what's next. All right, everybody, welcome back. And let's kind of do a recap, a real quick summary here, and why I think it's so important that we talk through these issues. Supernote is on the cusp, I think, of really disrupting the e-ink market, releasing a device, at least if it is what it's rumored to be, that's one of the most forward thinking, productivity aligned devices on the e-ink market. Why do I say that? Well, I say that for several reasons. One, it's modular. One of the nicest things about the A6X2 is this modular design. No other device does this. Whether you look at the newest Go 10.3, it's not modular. If you look at the V-Woods, which is again a pre-production device and it's not really on the market. I know there's a lot of hype about it. I know that it's making a lot of buzz, but it's not out yet. If you look at the books devices, none of them are ahead of the game like this is in right to repair. So it's super cool that they're thinking 2 years out and are already doing something that's very important and strategic. Another thing that I think they're on the cusp of is this idea that they are really thinking through and being purposeful about how their devices skirt that line between distraction free and full on Android. They're giving freedom, they're thinking in a sustainable way, not only with modularity, but with intentional design choices, or with the idea that in the future it may be a dual boot between Linux or Android, so you can pick and choose and have the platform operate the way you want it to operate. But even above all of that, their quality and attention to detail is very good on their devices. And I think that if they can get the things right now from the software side that are causing them and the community some headaches solved, really the sky's the limit. I'm not worried about if it is zero point 0.1 millimeters thinner than the V-Woods or the Remarkable or the Books 10.3 Go. That doesn't impress me. I don't look for something that thin. I don't want to write on a sheet of paper. I want to write on a notebook. And that's about the size of the Supernote. I'm not in the thinness, of course, and I don't see that as something that I want to engage with. What I do want to engage with is functionality, organizational capability, and usefulness. Supernote does all of those things really, really well. And they really need to focus on that, hone in on that, make that a priority. If they do that, I don't think that really the market is prepared for what the A5X2 could be. And that's going to be really cool. So we'll see. I could be wrong. Always share with me your thoughts, your comments. Please like, please subscribe. It's always a joy to hear from you. I appreciate all of the support that I've been given as we've created this channel and really started to create a community and having conversations with one another. It's really meant a lot to me. So tell me your thoughts. Drop it in the comments below. Are you all in on V-Woods and AI and where it's going? Are you all in on books and having full Android? It's okay if you are. If that's your device and what you think is the most productive for you, that's great. Or are you more like me and you think that this is the right balance between, and I don't want to say focus and productivity. I know that, Kit and I have been going back and forth and we may have a live stream on this at some point. To me, it's not about focus versus productivity. It's about how are you most productive for the task at hand or the thing you're doing. And I plan to make a video about how I can use my computer and the Supernote in conjunction with PDF editing, going back and forth between the two devices to really kind of make that a very productive workflow that wouldn't happen as easily without this device. Stay tuned for that. As always, again, thank you for watching. Like, subscribe. Please tell all your friends and family. And until next time, I will see you soon. Have a great day.